Something important is already happening in Toronto real estate, and most people are missing it. Prices aren't crashing, but they're not done falling either. Also, things are true at the same time, and one group of homeowners will benefit from waiting, while the other quietly gets hurt by it. This isn't 2008, it's slower than that. And because it's slower, it's easier to misread. Most homeowners I've talked to say the same thing. I'm tired of waiting. They're not scared, they're not stuck. The problem is this: waiting used to be neutral. In the market we're in right now, it isn't. Here's the big mistake people are making. They're asking, are prices going up or down? That's the wrong question. The right question is, which part of the market am I in actually? Because Toronto is already split. One side of the market is stabilizing. The other side is still under pressure. Same city, same interest rates, completely different outcomes. And this has nothing to do with optimism or fear. It has to do with supply and demand right now. And there's one metric that explains the split better than prices or headlines. It tells us where prices are likely headed into at least the first quarter of 2026. And once you see it, the confusion clears up fast. I'm going to share my screen with you. So let's look at sales in terms of activity. What's happening with the freehold market? This gives you an idea what has happened in the last 7 years, because this takes into consideration COVID, where money was very cheap, to also where rates were the highest back in 2022 and 2023, and when rates have come down. Give you an idea what's happening with activity. When we look at before the bump in activity that has happened when rates dropped like tremendously, let's look at what happened in November back then. Back then, there was 961 sales. Normal market, we had to, in 2019, about 1,200 sales. So it was up 21% already. And when you look at in November, we're up at another 20%. And then as you can see where this pattern's going, right? So, but when you see what happens in November 2022, down 45% in sales. 2023, very similar to 2022. And 2024, up about 26%. Then when we look at 2025, which we are right now, we're down about 8%. So when we're taking out all the craziness of the market that is happening here, and you look at sales activity, we're not that far from where we were back in 2018. So we're back to almost, I hate to say this, normal activity, right? And then the next thing that we look at is what's happened with prices during all that time. When you look at prices, where prices were back in 2018, even back then, when you look at prices, average price was 1.2. And then we're staying at 1.4 right now. So prices are still higher than they were 7 years ago. So you see where we are in terms of the resilience of the freehold market as a whole, even with the turbulence. We're still higher, almost $200,000 higher on average than we were back in 2018, which is very normal as a market. See, this is a very normal market where it goes up, goes down, goes up, goes up, go down. But you can see it has never dropped under these numbers under 1.2, essentially, stay around there. So that's one. The next thing we look at is like, what's going to happen with the market in the next 3 months? I could tell you, it's based on months of inventory. This is the absorption rate, how quickly properties are getting picked up. As a seller, you want to see this as a low number. As a buyer, you want to see a high number. So when we're looking at, even back in 2018, when we look at the November 2018, see what was happening there, where our prices are higher than that. That was even at 2.3%, 2.3 months of inventory. That's the seller's market, clearly seller's market. Anything under 4 is a seller's market. 2.3 is a seller's market. And you can see that it's a crazy seller's market back in September 2021. It was only 1 month of inventory. But right now, we're sitting at 3.78 months of inventory, essentially a balanced market. What balanced market means is that when it's a balanced market, that's when either side that don't have leverage. Like sellers and buyers, they don't. They negotiate on level playing field where there's enough choices, but just enough choices to satisfy the buyers out there, but not enough to make it so that buyers have control, and vice versa. So we're at 3.78 months of inventory. This is the metric you look at. And this is a metric that is not usually shown on a lot of data, which I don't know why, but this clearly shows you what's going to happen in the next 3 months. Just based on this alone already, assuming there's no crazy changes and status quo keeps the way it is, it's going to be a balanced market. So that means prices are going to pretty much flatline. They're not going to go up by any means as a whole. That is obviously every neighborhood is a little bit different depending on the type of property you're selling, what school district you're in, for sure. But having said that, Toronto as a whole, it's going to be balanced entering the new year. So let's take a look at condos. What is happening there in terms of activity? We have 836 sales, down about 23% from a year ago. Let's compare to what has happened in 2018. In 2018, you can see the amount of sales that we had in 2018 was about 1,300 sales, and we're at 836, which is much lower than that. And you can see the height at one time. We're selling about 2,600 units. That's a lot. That's a lot in Toronto as a whole. But having said that, sales activity has slowed down tremendously, as you can see in terms of activity. It's been a downward trajectory. But also, you look at average prices as well. When you look at prices in the last 7 years, you see back in 2018, into November, it was about 600,000 as an average. Right now, we're sitting at 695. So it's still above where we were on average, like 100,000 more than we were 2018. As you can see, real estate it still holds steady in terms of pricing. It has come down, don't get me wrong, since the hype, but when you compare it to about 7 years ago, we're still ahead of the game. You're still $100,000 more on average. But let's take a look at months of inventory. This is going to tell us what's going to happen in the next 3 months. The type of market we're in, it tells you the month of inventory tells us the type of market we're in. The type of market we're in right now, we have 6.3 months of inventory. That's a clearly strong buyer's market. It hasn't been this crazy strong for buyers for many, many years. It has never been. You can see at least that last 7 years, never. And even when you look at back in 2018, we're 1.45 months of inventory. That was very low inventory. Even when it was a balanced market, that was in about October 2020. That was clearly right during COVID, right? So a little bit different. As you can see, month of inventory has been rising for the last little while, ever since essentially June, July, essentially. So you see it's been going up. So this is a clear indicator. I'm going to tell you right now what's going to happen with prices. It's based on this alone. Based on this alone, the next 3 months, I can see prices coming down even more for condos. Given that there's 6 months of inventory, there's going to be some sellers that are going to need to sell. Given what's going to happen with renewals and anything that's related to financing and just the ability to rental places. So that might not change in the last little while. As we know, in January 1st, a lot of government workers have to go back to work downtown. But knowing that we have 6 months of inventory, prices are still going to probably come down a little bit. Not a lot, but there's going to be pressure to push it down because month of inventory is pretty high. As you can see, it has never been this high for the last little while. This is one clear metric I've always paid attention, because every month this tells us how quickly the market's moving and what's the absorption rate, essentially. So now you can see it clearly. Freehold homes are sitting in a balanced market. That's why prices are stabilizing there. Condos are sitting in a strong buyer's market, and that's why prices are still drifting lower. And this is how the market's going to behave for the next little while. And this is where waiting becomes dangerous. Waiting in a balanced market is very different from waiting in a buyer's market. Same action, very different consequences. Obviously, it depends on if you're a buyer or seller. If you're a condo seller waiting in this market, you could be losing money day by day. If you're a buyer waiting in condo market, you might get some deals, but it all depends on when you think the bottom is. And the market doesn't reward guessing the bottom. It rewards understanding where you are. If you're a buyer in a market that's stabilizing, then waiting too long, you're going to completely miss the bottom and you're going to be where prices have started to climb. If you're a seller in the condo market, every month that you wait for that perfect price, or you're thinking the prices will get better and you haven't listed yet, it's going to get worse before it gets better. If you're a condo buyer in the condo market, waiting can give you some reward, potentially. Patience there could be the best, but at the same time, there are some deals to be had right now. if you're selling in the stabilized market, prices are going to be at where they are for the next little while. I can't see prices going up or down in the next foreseeable future. So make sure you understand which market you're in. So Toronto isn't crashing, but isn't moving together either. By 2026, the people who do the best won't say they timed it perfectly. They'll say they stopped waiting blindly and start paying attention to the correct metric. Remember what that is? Months of inventory. If you like videos like this that shows you how to read the market, show you data so you can make decisions, subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks again for watching. See you soon.